Shannon Tindle, writer-director currently at Sony Pictures Animation. But I've done a little bit of everything. Storyboard, character design. I think a lot of people know me from character design. Yeah, that's in general the scope of what I'm doing right now. So I'm gonna be on a panel with Chris Wedge and David Silverman. And I think Ian is conducting that. And I think what the discussion is gonna be about is having an honest discussion about what production is like on a film and what development is like on a film. And I think people who know me know that I tend to be a pretty direct person. And I like to talk about these things, and they're things that I think are important for people coming into animation to know about. You know, when we go to school, we talk about the techniques and the craft of animation, but nobody really prepares you for the business side and how to deal with people. And I would say 80% of my job is communicating with people, dealing with the politics inside of a studio. I say try to find a way to get your way. And I think we're gonna be talking about some of those things. So I've often, it's only in half joking, I think it would be great to have a reality show that followed the production of an animated film so that people could see the impassioned arguments, the swearing, like the things that really happen for these family films. And it's because I think a lot of it has to do with what we do requires a lot of imagination, and each step that we take is not a fully finished process. It's not like when you go out and you shoot live action footage, you get an immediate reaction to a performance. And so we're trying to develop in people's minds, and when I say people's minds, it's the audience. It's in the audience at first is the story crew, and then the executives that you're working with, trying to help them imagine what the film's gonna be like in the context of a story reel. And so, because it takes so long, too, I think there's this constant kind of reworking of things. And sometimes I think there are things that don't need to be reworked. It's just that you've sat for them for so long that they become boring to you, but they're not really boring to an audience. It's why I like to show things to people constantly. I have a small group of people that I really trust who I show things to get their reaction to. But I think that it's just the creative process is a messy one. And I understand that there's this constant need by a studio, especially who's gonna be investing a lot of money, I totally understand it, on your idea to try and turn it into math. And it's not math, it's art. And so you're trying to find your way through it. And I often say, like, look, I don't know if it's gonna work either, but you gotta at least trust me to try it. And as much as people say it, and you say trust the process, now more than ever, because of what's going on with theaters and distribution, and now with streaming, people are less apt to kind of trust the process. They want to see results now. But animation is an iterative process. It's something that takes a long time, and you have to be patient, and you have to be able to imagine what the end result's gonna be like. And so, like, to get it down onto even a micro level, if I watch I watch way more live action films than I do animated films. And in live action films, it's nothing to have a director have a long take on a conversation without cutting around it, because you get the subtleties of the performance immediately in camera. Well, if you try to board that in animatic, it can be very boring, because you have to imagine how subtle the performances are gonna be. It's even tough as a director when you're going like, no, trust me. This is gonna be really interesting when we get the nuance of the performance in. But you have to have people trust you in that process. And animation tends to be, people want it to be snappy, they want it to be fast. And I want to engage people, and I want there to be a rhythm, like music to it. And you just have to earn the trust and constantly kind of be selling your idea and how you want to do it. Especially when you're like, I have only done my own projects in terms of writing and directing. So there's things that I've sold. So there's an added level of a gamble for a studio, because it's not an existing franchise or property. It's my new thing. And so that's even more of a buy-in that they have to get on board with. So I would say sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And we've seen films where they've done that scramble at the end and they've done a rewrite, and it just didn't work. And you start to wonder, is it because you lost faith in the initial concept over years and you felt like it might be a little bit too much of a gamble? or you just maybe got tired of the idea, or the studio got tired of the idea. I'm not really sure, but again, I think it goes back to the fact that animation takes so long. You can start to doubt decisions that you made years prior, and so something that felt good in that moment, and it's this constantly changing puzzle piece, and you're also working with notes that you're getting from above too. So if there can be one note that the perception is that it's a small note, but it's a puzzle piece and it's this very intricate puzzle. And when you pull one thing out and other things start to collapse around it, things that had payoffs that now don't have a payoff, or they don't have a setup, then you have to work your way back through and you see that it doesn't work. Having the fundamental idea not work, I don't know. I haven't been part of a production that's had that dramatic a change, luckily, fortunately. And all I can speak to kind of how I work, and I have less experience than a lot of folks, but we just pound that script and we work the script and we board the script on the first pass. That's what we board, knowing that we're going to iterate and it's going to become better and we're going to refine it. We're going to do rewriting as we go, but the script is at least a template to follow. And I think in some instances, they're kind of writing while they're boarding at the same time, which is not a good idea. In the same way in live action, it's not good to be writing while you're shooting, and you're constantly chasing your tail, or they're chasing a release date, or they're chasing, with the big studios, they're chasing, oh, hey, marketing's got this deal with a toy line, and we need to be able to make that deal, and we can't move it, we can't back off of that date. I know some of those things. When you work at a certain level with a big studio, you just got to accept that there are these different things that are part of it. And it's one of those things that are frustrating, but it is part of the deal. I'm hoping now with places like Netflix and Apple getting into the game and Amazon, that we're actually going to see for the first time the funding of very interesting projects that are done at different budget levels where you can have a lot more creative freedom. For example, the announcement that Netflix is going to do a Glenn Keane animated feature and a Henry Selick animated feature. Now, those two guys couldn't be farther apart in terms of their philosophies, and I love both of them. So I'm really excited to see the diversity that we're actually going to finally get in terms of storytelling and the type of story we're telling. And that's going to be really interesting because they just got to feed the beast of getting content out. And from what I understand, they're giving pretty fair amount of creative control to those directors. So. Well, I can say it's my original idea. I brought it to Sony. It's an idea that I had for a long time. I brought it to Sony. I think when I was still doing my Google Spotlight story, I started to chat with them, and they were very into it. And Mike Moon, who was the development executive there at the time, who I've been friends with for a long time, he'd known of the idea and said, hey, we got to push this forward. Let's do it. And it's something that is based on things that I loved as a kid. There's a little bit of it's more present day. It's not a period piece. There's a little bit of a sci-fi element to it. And what I really wanted to do with this film was, where with Kubo was me telling a story that was very personal about my wife's relationship with her mother, and like telling that story. This one was, how can I tell a story that's like a big popcorn movie? Every trailer and teaser and commercial you see for it, people were like, oh, I know what this is. And then sitting in the theater and being very pleasantly surprised that we take them in a different direction. So it's not a bait and switch. There are these big, massive action sequences that are a lot of fun, but there's a personal core to it, and there were real stakes to it. And so that's what I want to do with the story, and the studio's been very supportive of it. And so that's what I can say about it. It's a combination of both, and it tends to cross over quite a bit. I guess an example I would bring, both with Kubo and then with this Haunted Mansion project that I was developing with Disney for a while, is I have an idea and I would develop it in more of a traditional animation way, where I start to write my ideas down and then I start to draw pictures and I start to develop the characters from there. So I'm doing both at the same time. I'm asking myself what this character wants, what this character's about, and then how do I express that in a drawing, in a design? And then I just let it gestate for a little bit, and I'm attacking it constantly. So there's this very intense period for me of just a couple of months where I'm digging into it. I'm doing a lot of research because I want there to be an authenticity to it. Research is very important to me. And then once I kind of have the idea clear, I give myself a cutoff, and I give myself deadlines too, because it allows me to be structured in my thinking rather than just letting things go. And then I just write. And when I've done all that thinking, I used to think of my process as procrastination. It's not. I allow myself the time to think. And then when I get to writing or drawing that thing, it just comes out. So with the example of like Haunted Mansion, like I stewed on that for about 2 months. I was doing beat boards and doing all these drawings and doing different things. I did a pitch there, and they really responded to the pitch. And then they said, you've got a couple of weeks to kind of restructure the pitch based on our notes. And I thought, well, I could do that, or I could just write a draft of the pilot. And so I just went away for 2 weeks. I didn't tell them that. And I just wrote the script, and I said, here's my answer to this. And it was a clear, definitive answer of the direction I wanted to go. And that tends to be my process now. Pitching, tone is always tough, and tone is a big part of what I think any director does when they write or direct. So I find that you can get tone across in artwork, and even more specifically in a script. They can see exactly what you're going for in that draft. And even if it's a first draft, they get a pretty clear picture. So drawing, writing little, jotting ideas down about characters and who they are, writing a detailed outline, and then for me, just writing a script just to get it out of my system so I can start to rethink again, moving quickly. And I move the same way in reels. Get it up, cut it together as quickly as possible so you can see the whole thing. That's basically my process. I draw a lot of creative inspiration from my personal life at home, very specific things that just I witness with my family, my wife and my daughter. Something else I've been doing lately is I'll just go out and, it's kind of an artist's second hand to start to sketch. But what I've been doing lately is just writing what I'm seeing, because it's insane the complexity of human life and characters when you really start to observe people. And I'll just jot down what they're doing and what they're wearing and little tics that they have. And then I'm a big reader. So I'll start to read, in the case of Kubo, I'd always been interested in Japanese culture, and I started to just read like Lafcadio Hearn's translation of Kwaidan, this collection of amazing Japanese folk tales. Really dig into that. I'll watch a lot of movies. It tends to go back and forth depending on what level of the process I'm in. If I'm writing, I'm reading a lot, and if I'm boarding on my own film, I start to watch films, and then I'll go back and forth. So it's a collection of art, and they typically tend to be far outside of animation. I don't look at animation too much. There are a lot of great animated films that are happening, but I'd rather be looking at art and life and other films. Well, I would say the thing that's the biggest difference now I'm going to sound like an old man, but coming out is just all the kind of the social trading that's going on. So what I'm experiencing now is you'll see a lot of young gentlemen and young ladies who are coming out of school who have 150, 250, 300,000 followers on Instagram, doing their one thing. But when they get into the rigors of production, as you say, they can't draw in a different style. And I'm going to talk just a little bit specifically about character design, for example, because when I was coming up, everybody wanted to be an animator. Now it seems everybody wants to be a character designer. As a character designer, unless you're running your own show, you have to be able to work in a lot of different styles, because those productions are going to require that you do that. So you have to study those styles. Then you have to be able to make them production ready. So you're going to have to turn your characters. And what I see is people are getting thousands of pats on the back from strangers telling them how beautiful their drawings are. And their drawings are beautiful, but they can't do a turn on the drawing. Or they can't, a director might say, hey, we want to work in more of a Ronald Searle style for this production. And they can't do it. And so what I would say is you need to think as a business person in that way, and do what we all have to do and push your ego out of the way a little bit, and kind of don't pay attention to what the public is saying so much. Because the moment that you start to believe the hype around you, it's the moment you start to kind of lose it as an artist. You have to constantly, I'm never happy with what I'm doing. And I'm okay with that. I think it's part of me that I constantly want to strive to be better, to do it. And I trust people who are honest with me, who are close to me, would kind of put me in check and criticize my work. And so I would say that's one big element, is don't believe your own hype. Get into the business and learn how to be a real production artist, and try to do that even ahead of time. The other thing that I would say is just know that a big part of your job is going to be to communicate your ideas. And we had this really amazing teacher. He had actually left Cal Arts when I was there, but I had him later when they started Chenard up again, Leo Monahan. And one of the big parts of his class was it wasn't just enough to do great assignments. You had to be able to tell him why you did certain things. And what was so important with that is being able to pitch your own artwork and try to sell your own artwork, because you can't just rely on the drawing to sell it, because people can't tell everything that was in your head from that one drawing or those few drawings. So you have to be able to kind of push your ideas through. Same thing if you're a storyboard artist, or if you want to pitch your own idea, you have to be able to clearly communicate with people. Communication is a keystone of what we do, and a lot of times we spend so much time in our heads, at our desks, closed off from people. It's difficult for you to do that, but it is essential to be successful in our craft. Unless you're doing your own independent film and you don't have to work with anybody, which is a rare case, you've got to deal with people. And then when you get out there, even if you do that, if you're going to promote it, you have to be able to communicate with people. You have to be able to get out in front of people. And I just see it time and time again. People think that you're just going to come in and just draw all day and not ever have to interact with people. And that's not the case. You have to constantly interact with people, and you should, because you're going to be exposed to new ideas and new cultures and new ways of thought that you wouldn't if you're just closed off at your drawing table all day.